Hello. When we were setting out what I should speak about, we covered a lot of ground. I've covered them in my slides. We've had a discussion, and I'm excising a lot. So we'll focus on just a couple of things, but there's a lot more to talk about in here. Happy to take any questions. There's a wider presentation if you'd like. We'll take it from there. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, the context of today, the Commission sets and enforces rules for product safety in cooperation with the states, but we're the one-stop shop for regulation. The powers include the power to ban products, setting standards, requiring specific information to be supplied, which is quite important in relation to these products, collect and analyse information, investigate and enforce. I could talk about the responsibilities of manufacturers and suppliers, how standards are set and enforced, what we know about safety in baby slings, and a best guess about regulatory approaches to baby slings. On the basis of what I've heard so far and talking to you over coffees and at the back, I'm going to concentrate on the last two. The current situation is that the Commission has issued a safety alert. This one, it's in your show bags. It came out of a death and public concerns about it. We'll go into that in more detail. There is no Australian standard and none is planned. Doesn't mean it won't happen, it's just there's none in the pipeline. The Europe and the US are both working on standards. And there is an international group, of which I am the coordinator and the drafter, working between agencies in Canada, the US and Europe on drafting what we're calling a consensus document. We're looking to align our approaches about this. They're on the radar. Baby slings are on the radar because there's a number of what we regard as preventable deaths, and there's a number of recalls where products have failed. As far as I can tell, there's been about 20 deaths associated with baby slings. There have been a half dozen recalls associated with product failures, mainly in the US and Europe. More detail later as we go. The concerns with slings are to prevent the deaths being repeated, to look at the issues of product failure, and to look at what information and instructions need to be supplied with the products themselves. No. This is all about what the powers of the Commission are and what we generally do about products. You're not interested. Okay. So what's the alert message? What's the message in the alert? The alert is take care. It's a warning. It's an alert. The alert is about avoiding specific positions. Fetal positions, face pressed against the wearer positions. And the alert is about high-risk babies. It's a distressing topic. The reason we're talking about it is to avoid problems. So what do we know? Of those 20 deaths, of the 20 deaths that we know about, the overwhelming majority, not all, but the overwhelming majority are young babies, under 4 months. It appears that there are issues associated with breathing, as the speakers have said before. There are higher risk groups. The particular risk is age, but there are other issues as well. I think that's as much as I need to say about that. What's needed? What do we need? We need to alert users. We need good information and good instructions about what's going on, what they need to do. That has to come out of our experience, our collective experience about existing issues, how the baby is carried. The The key issue that appears to be turning up in the United States, or the key mnemonic about it, is see the baby, let the baby see you. An alternative one, I think, being worked on by the industry, the juvenile products industry in the United States, is seeable, kissable. A mnemonic about holding the baby so the baby is not in the fetal position. The fetal position is for fetuses. Babies need to be carried as babies. There are two issues that we think turn up. Again, what we're doing is speculating from the information we have, taking it forward. This is the way that it always works in injury prevention. We don't have perfect information. We're drawing conclusions from a relatively small number of cases. But there is the issues about the way in which the baby's carried is about mechanical suffocation. You know what I was trying to say. In which the way in which the baby's held closes airways. The other is likely to be smothering, where the trunk of the baby is, the ability of the baby to breathe is constrained by something being covered. Babies' noses are very small, their mouths are very small. That's why the issue turns up in all sleeping arrangements with babies. In cots, cradles, cribs, everything. Because babies are unable to, they don't have either the physical or mental development to get themselves out of trouble, and they get in trouble. And these issues are, they're sleeping all the time. No, they're not. They sleep a lot. Okay. So the alert to users. Care in construction and design. That the weights and sizes are the right, that the specifications are right, that the buckles work, that the buckles don't break. And as I was speaking to, who was I speaking to about this? Yes. That there are some issues in which the fabric is passing through a buckle. There's been issues with the stitching breaking. There's been issues, mainly in Europe, about chemicals that are in the product themselves. There are concerns, distinguishing that from issues in which we've seen injury. There are concerns also about things like inhalation hazards, things breaking off, whatever. And again, focusing on the idea about care in use. The challenge around slings are about getting the key messages, that is getting people to listen. There's a very strong issue, I would argue, in this product about the balance between alert and alarmed. We don't want to say slings have killed babies. That's definitely overkill. We don't want to ignore the fact that babies have died in slings. And how do we strike the balance in terms of reasonable promotion and about healthy living, all the wider benefits from slings for baby and for wearer? What's the balance for this product at this time? The balance between significant and completeness. How far down that list of things that we know about do we go in order to tell people about it? And the example I usually use is pharmaceutical products always come with an encyclopedia of materials in which nobody ever reads them. And the key issue with pharmaceutical products from an injury prevention point of view is the most common thing is the wrong dose. Now, if we said much less about what the problems are and focused on getting the dose right, we would reduce that injury. But, what's another example? There are people, we now are aware, who are affected by products in particular ways. The best example would be peanuts. You can't sell a food product now without putting peanuts, the nuts on it, because there are people in society. So the balance between significance and completeness turns up in modern life much more than it ever did, and is a practical issue about what needs to be said and how much we say it. And then the most important issue that turns up in every product all the time is translating what is said into action, getting things done. My best guess about what's going on in the future is that the international agencies will draft a consensus paper. I know they will because I'm drafting it, which will focus on the education message on positioning and use. The Europeans have a different approach to how much detail to put in things than the Americans do. We sit somewhere in between, but the consensus paper will focus on that issue of positioning and use. ACCC will look at the paper, international standards, available data and discussions, such as the complaints that people in the room have made about particular products, which are all logged on our database. We'll look at those things, and then if ACCC sees the need to act, then there will be some public discussion about it, and everyone will be invited to contribute, which is where access to you through the organisers or your registration on our website or whatever, that's the way in which these discussions happen. It's the way it happens for all products. These are set out by statutory rule. ACCC must go out for public comment on these things, these can't. And the only question is to be in the loop. There's a website in which a lot of this material is held, particularly things like the baby slings, but also access to wider documentation, which is also in your grab bag, keeping babies safe. The parallels for other products are there. That's it.
I'm just thinking, of course, for our online viewers, they're not going to be able to hear that question. So it's a little bit about if you've got a home business, what obligations do you have to pass on information about products that could be faulty, even if they're homemade, made overseas perhaps? What obligation does the seller have to pass on any information that's been given to her when she's running a home business selling these things or carriers? Ian.
I worked for a long time with Kidsafe Australia on product safety issues. And let me talk about what I think is a good idea as opposed to what you need to do. And a good idea is to make the information known. My suggestion would be go to organisations, but there is now a responsibility of ACCC, it's relatively new, to collect data. We have a database. And in fact, I've spoken to 2 people today who've made complaints, alerts, who've alerted the authorities. There is another thing that is working in our favour at the moment, and that is that the states and territories and the Commonwealth, when they revised all the regulation around this, have made it mandatory for people who are involved in the sale of a product, when there is an injury associated with the product, doesn't have to be caused by it, it is a mandatory requirement that people report that injury. That isn't an admission of fault. In fact, most of the cases, I'd argue, are not about fault and don't result in anything. But what it is, it is a mechanism that the politicians have introduced to close the information gap. So people have no right to remain silent. You're not talking about that, you're talking about a product that you see. Well, for the 25 years I've been working in product safety, the major source of information on unsafe products is people who are in the field. This is an example of that. If it's a problem, we need to know. There's a website, there's a way to do it, call me, whatever. There is a number. Yes, there is. The question was, is there a way to check products that are available overseas that you buy internationally? And yes, there is. There is a list of bans and alerts. We've got them on the phones. We've got all that sort of stuff. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. We even have an app. Let me show you when we get to the end. So there is a place. There's been quite a lot of cooperation with the selling agents. So, for example, eBay and other agents are are keeping a watch on products that are that are illegal to sell in Australia or banned, whatever. But this is a perennial problem. We don't have the impermeable borders that we used to. It's keep alert but not alarmed. I'm taking the question to be a question about whether what the impact of regulation in this area would be, and whether it might advantage big brands or well-known brands over smaller, possibly better product. I don't see regulation as coming in this area. If it did come in this area, I think that the regulation would be about supply of information. If the end point of the current discussions indicates that from an injury point of view, education is the last resort. What you want to do is make the product safer, design the issues out. I don't see that the issues we're seeing at the moment in terms of the relatively small number of deaths are design issues. They're about use. So our thinking, our collective thinking, the discussion at the moment is we need to make sure that information is given. Now, whether it's supplied at the time of sale or there's a tag on the product, that's a question about what would work best. It's a poor response. I don't want to say poor. It's a second best response, but it seems to be the most discussed at the moment. So I don't see it coming. Responding to your wider question about whether regulation does that, regulation is a very blunt tool. It's a very difficult tool to use well. So it's used with reluctance. You have to be very clear about what it is you're trying to do. You've got to be very clear about what the tool is you're using. You've got to be very clear that it will work in the way. I wrote a PhD thesis on it because it's so difficult. But I don't see regulation except in the area of education and information coming in this. I'm not saying it is coming, I'm saying that's the only thing I can foresee.
So Yvonne was asking about how information is gathered by the ACCC, because coming from the States, she was saying that litigation is often the way that it's led to information being gathered. So,
okay. You only hear about the things that don't work, but the United States has a piece of legislation which we copied, learned from, I would say. And most of the fines that are given in the United States are for the non-provision of information, not for failures. They have a very strict idea that if there is a problem, you are to report it. And that's a major source of information. But ACCC participates in all the product safety standards that are developed. It has an active outreach program. It has a phone-in number. And on the screen at the moment is a list of things that we collect so that the two people I spoke to about complaints that have been made, reports is a better word than complaints, that have come in. Now that's the information that is likely to be collected on it. So we have a source of information. We're out there, we're listening, but we need to be told. Industry associations, interested bodies, researchers, they're all sources of information. The academic research that's gone on, the injury groups at Monash and at Queensland, all those people are in our loop for collection of information. But please, tell us.
So a question about whether the baby wearing community can be useful to the ACCC on an ongoing negotiation basis, or information sharing basis. Yeah.
The answer to that question is yes, of course. It's the mechanism we've used for things like child seats in cars for decades. I don't want to overpromise on this issue though. ACCC, like every other agency you've ever dealt with, has got too few people chasing too many tasks. Our focus on this is it a problem? If it is a problem, what's the nature of the problem and what do we do about it? And agencies like to get this fixed and then move on. So it's not that the Commission is going to have individual teams of people working on baby wearing, but if it's important, the Commission has to know, the Commission has to work on it. We are working on it. It's just that there are other things that are being worked on as well. But the answer is absolutely yes.